the patience and the endurance of the believers. Here are those that keep the commandments of God and the faith of what? The faith of Jesus. So here are people that love Jesus. They know they're saved by grace because there's no other way to be saved. But they love Jesus so much to do what he says. They love Jesus so much they want to obey him. They love Jesus so much they want to keep his commandments. They hear the beck and they hear the call of Christ. Millions of people are hearing this call. They sense that we are living in unusual times of Earth's history. They sense that before the coming of Christ, God is leading us back to primitive faith, back to biblical faith, back to the true faith of the apostles. And they hear that call. Some time ago, my wife and I dedicated 10 years that we would go back and forth to India. In the year 2000 to 2010, we sponsored Bible instructors in India. We built churches in India. Just by the grace of God, we got off the planes and our Indian friends just embraced us. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. There was a time we stayed in the same city, and we still go there now, a city called Chennai. We were holding large meetings like this in Chennai. They had to put up the posters at night. They had to put them up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because the Hindu militants would come and beat them. And a young pastor in his 20s was putting up this poster. And as he was putting it up, the Hindu militant gang came around. They beat him in the face. They hit him in the eyes. He had glasses, and they trampled on his glasses. And he came crawling back to the church. And the senior pastor said, "I'll go put up the posters." And he rushed the man to the hospital. It was very difficult. The only place we could hold our meetings was in the Pereira Center. The Pereira Center is the center of atheism. Why do we hold our meetings there, the center of atheism? Because the Hindus they thought it was unsacred ground. They wouldn't put their foot on the ground, see. They wouldn't come there. The militants wouldn't come. But we believe that God gave us that auditorium, and the people came by the thousands to hear the gospel of Christ. They packed every place, no place to sit. But there was in that audience a woman, and as I looked at her, I knew that she didn't have the Indian features. She was a Chinese woman. Chinese businesswoman, and she had those Chinese features. And she was in India. She had left China to come to India, and she had established a business all through India. Very well-to-do woman, but she didn't have peace in her heart. There was something missing in this woman's life. All of her material values, the beautiful home that she lived in, didn't satisfy her. And one day she came across a Bible, and she began to read it. As she read Scripture, she came across Christ, the one that can fully satisfy the needs of every heart. And she found in Jesus refuge, and she found in Jesus security, and she found in Jesus salvation. She did not know any other Christians. And she knelt down by her bed, and she just wept her eyes out and said, "Jesus, I want to come to you." And in that Hindu culture, in that city, she made that decision to become a Christian. As she continued to read the Bible, she read in Genesis that God blessed the seventh day, that God sanctified the seventh day, that God made the seventh day holy. And she said, this wasn't a day for the Jews, God gave it to humanity. And she read how the Sabbath was part of God's 10 Commandment law. And she read that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. It must be the Lord's day because the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Mark 2, verse 27 and 28. Luke 6, verse 5. And Matthew, she read, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And she said, nobody else in the world does this. She didn't know one Sabbath keeper in the whole world. And she said, nobody else, she didn't know that there were 20 million Adventist Sabbath keepers. Had no idea, never met one. Never met a Sabbath keeper. And she said, if Jesus is my Savior, if nobody else in the world does this, and it's in the Bible, I will do it. Amen. And for 1 year, she worshiped in her home every Sabbath. Amen. Every Sabbath. Amen. Alone. Because she said, Jesus has asked me to. One day, she was walking down the street, and she saw Christian, something, Sabbath keeping, Adventist church. She said, there are other people that keep the Sabbath. I'm not alone. She came to our meetings. I made the appeal to come to Christ. I made the appeal to be baptized. She came forward. We could not baptize her and many others in public because it was much too dangerous. So early one morning, I took this dear Chinese woman who had kept the Sabbath in her home for a year, whose life was changed by the grace of God. I took her early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, to a location in a quiet church sanctuary with just a few people there. We couldn't even tell about her baptism. I baptized her in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. Amen. God is still reaching out to people today. Amen. It was not easy for that woman. And sometimes it's not easy for us because we're so locked in the past. I cannot tell you what to do, but I can say to you, you're always safe in following Jesus. Amen. You're always safe in following Jesus. Amen. Would you like to say, Jesus, I want to follow you? Amen. Jesus, I want to follow you, as Charles slips up to sing. The ushers are going to give you a little response card. And I want to pray for you tonight. And the response card says, I desire to follow Jesus fully. Just pass them across to every person. Just pass them to every